In the last video, we went over this example, which is a direct implementation of the if and the else. This script, convert temperatures.py, I will run it shortly to remind you. This will prompt the user to enter either 1 or 2, depends on which operation they would like to do. Let's go with 1. We will be converting from Celsius to Fahrenheit. Let's go for 0. And there we go, 32 Fahrenheit. This is what the last video was about. In this video, I will go over data types for storing multiple data. So as you can see here, we have 4 variables, x, y, z, and w. The x variable is what would we call a list. You use these brackets to create it. And use the comma to separate each element inside of it. So we have over here 1, 2, and 3. These are integers. For anyone who's done programming before, lists in Python are the same as the array, except they can store multiple data types. So here we have a string as well. It can also store another list inside of it. You have a lot of freedom with whatever you want to put inside this list. A characteristic of it would be the index. The index in programming refers to the position of every element inside of the list. The index usually starts from 0. You will have to remember that because it is important later on. But this is how it starts. So this value of 1, which is an integer, its index is 0, so its position inside the list is 0. For the 2, it would be 1. For the 3, it would be 2. For this hello string value, it would be 3. And for the list, it would be 4. You can notice that we have 5 elements, yet the final index is 4 because the starting one is 0. Moving on to y. This variable contains something that we call a tuple. You use parentheses to declare it. It's the same concept as the list, as you can store any type of variable inside it, any type. For example, integer and strings and lists and tuples inside of it. What differentiates the tuple from the list is when you run the code, you can still make changes to the list. For example, with the .append function, which we will go over in the next video, or if we might use it in this one. But the tuple remains the same. This is useful for example, a RGB value. The RGB value is 3 numbers that go from 0 to 255. If you are using a program and you need a color, you could store it in a tuple. This is a very convenient way of doing it. Moving on to Z. This is what we call a dictionary. You use these squiggly brackets, whatever you call them. And these store a key and value pair. So as you can see, you also need a key value pair separated by these 2 dots. This column. For example, you have David, and David is the key. The one on the left is the key. The one on the right is the value. So the value that the David key holds is 25. This could be like David's age, for example. Chandler, the key Chandler has a value of 22. The key could be anything. It's not always a string and an integer. It could be the opposite, an integer then a string. It could also be a list, for example. The dictionary is very useful with the key value attribute it has. Unlike the list and the tuple, it doesn't have an index. So in the next video, we will see how we can navigate this dictionary and use the key value pair for our advantage. And moving on to the final one, the W variable stores something you would call a set. Use the squiggly brackets, but what differentiates it from the dictionary is it's not a key value pair because you don't have anything separated from the two dots or the column. As you can see, it's just like the list. You don't separate anything using the columns. The thing about the set is that you can't have duplicates inside of it. You can't have something as a duplicate value and it doesn't have an index. It's a bit of a weird data type, but we will go over it in the next video. Now, what I wanted to go over in this video is something we call loops. So imagine you have a program and you have a certain set of code that you want to be running over and over again. Well, this is where loops come in handy. So we have two loop types. We have the for loop and the while loop. Each has its own usage, but the goal is still the same. The way they work is very similar. We will start with the for loop. So the syntax would be for, and here we need to create a variable. Let's go with I. And then in range is a method you need parentheses at the end of it. Let's go from 0 to 5, 2 points, and then here we will write pass. Now this is the syntax for the for loop in Python. In other programming languages it looks much more different, but if you've coded before, this is how the for loop in Python works. The I variable is basically created when the for loop starts and it gets deleted when you get outside of the for loop. The I variable here is going from a range, so it will go from 0 to 5. Now inside here, instead of the pass, we can write a print function, for example hello, and if we run this code now, as you can see, hello was written 5 times. Now the thing is, I starts from 0 and the final value will be 4, right? It doesn't take into consideration 5. You will see now we can print I for ourselves, and we see, there we go, it goes from 0 to 4. So keep in mind, if you wanted to go from, let's see, from 1 to 10, this is wrong. You need to write 11. And there we go. Right, so this is the for loop in a nutshell. I will update some code inside the for loop, but I want to show you the while loop right now. The while loop is a bit different. You write while and now we need a condition. So let's say let's create a variable over here called n, and n will be equal to 0. So while n is bigger, or actually smaller than 5, we will print n. Now we need one more thing, which would be n plus equal to 1. So here let's move this in the loops section. So as you can see here, the while loop needs a condition which can be either true or false. So we created something called a counter. We created the variable n, which is 0, and inside the while loop, this piece of code, we use the plus and equal. This is equivalent to saying n is equal to n plus 1, which basically increments n by 1 every time the while loop is run. So it just adds plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 to the n. And here the condition is n is less than 5. So this while loop, when this turns false, the condition, it will exit. So as long as n is less than 5 and it starts as 0, the while loop will run the code inside of it. So when n gets to 5, it's not less than 5 anymore, it will exit. So we can run this now. And there you go, this is the for loop. And underneath here is the while loop that we have. We can print a separator. This is to separate the loops, right? So now if we run again, we have a separator, and you can clearly see this is the while loop section. So this is the for loop in a nutshell, and the while loop as well. These are useful for also navigating these data types. We will be navigating this list, or actually let's navigate a different list. So let's call this my list, and we have 1, 4, 6, 3, 8, 9. This is a random list. I want to show you something else in the for loop that will be useful. So instead of range, or actually I will show you the one with the range first. The indices here would be like this. The 1 is 0, 4 has the index 1, 6 has the index 2, 3 has the index 3, 8 has the index 4, 9 has the index 5. So we want to navigate from 0 to 5. So the start would be 0, and here if I write 5, it's wrong, it will stop at 4. I just showed it to you. We have to go with 6. So instead of printing I, this is how you can access an element in the list. You call the variable, and then you put the brackets of the list, and then we put I. Right, so before I run, let me explain this very quickly. So if you wanna access this hello specifically in X, we have to write X, and the index of it is 3. So X of 3, if we print this, it will give us hello, right? So if we run, there you go, it printed hello, right? As you can see here, this is our for loop. It printed our list or array or whatever you want to call it, but it's either a list or array. It printed it exactly how it is, because this is how you can navigate through it. Each time you add a plus 1 to it, it will go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. This is our counter. This is how you navigate this list in Python, by using this method here of calling the index, right? Another way to do it in Python, which is a very easy and convenient way, would be for I in, and then we call my list immediately, and then we print I, right? So actually I will make it into another for loop so you can see the difference. Print, and my mistake, and let's print another separator. There we go. So this for loop, we can use I again, because I gets created, and after the for loop ends, it gets deleted, so we can create it and use it again. So for I in my list, again, 2 dots. The only thing that changed is the range method. we instead use the variable name. If we go print I this time, let's see what happens. And there we go. It printed the list again. So the difference here, let's read this. The difference here between this for loop and this for loop is how we access the list. So in this for loop, we call the list and then we tell it we want this specific index, which is how we are getting every element inside the list by using the index I. But in this for loop, we are calling the variable inside the for loop, not inside the code of it. So I will instead, it won't be a counter like in this for loop. It will instead access every element. So in this for loop, I would be equal to 1, then I would be equal to 4. It's not a counter like this for loop. Over here, it takes the actual value, and this is why we can write print I instead of my list and then accessing the index I, right? Now for the while loop, unfortunately, this isn't a option in the while loop. We have to access it with the index method. So with n equal to 0 here, we have from 0 to 5. So n should be less than 6, or we could write less than or equal to 5, whichever one you prefer. We need the counter for n, and over here we can print my list and then the brackets and n inside of it. So now if we run, there we go. This is the third one, this is the first one, and the last one is the one used by the while loop, the one the while loop prints. So this is it for the loops. We only have the for loop and the while loop in Python. If you are a programmer and have programmed before in different languages, you might know about the do while. This isn't an option in Python. You would have to use the while loop by itself. So that's it for this video. In the next one, I will go in depth more with the data types and their functions, like the .append that I just mentioned. And we will use them in for loops so you can grasp the concept of loops even more. And thank you for watching.